Think you can cram your agenda past Congress, you are in for a rude awakening, you hear me? Now let me tell you a little something about the greatest word in politics, filibuster.
I got a word for you. Shut the f*** up.
2 weeks ago, we covered a list of 10 games where your choices actually matter. In that video, we listed out a number of titles in which your choices have lasting consequences on the story and characters, and how this was an advantage of video game storytelling over more traditional mediums. However, sometimes this sense of choice falls short. Whether a developer uses the illusion of choice as a narrative construct, or they just didn't fully commit to the idea of player choice having any real meaningful impact. There are plenty of examples where a game presents you with a choice, only to have it make no real substantial impact to the game's story. Welcome back to Game Gentleman. In this week's video, we look at 10 games where your choices don't mean a damn thing. Again, as we continue this theme of narrative choice and consequences, or lack thereof, we will be going into spoiler territory. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Number 10. Telltales Game of Thrones. We started our video about decisions that matter with a Telltale game, and we're going to start this video the exact same way. Part of the challenge with working within existing universes and timelines are that there are certain rules and plot beats that you have to adhere to. Where Telltale was able to manage this in series like The Walking Dead by telling an entirely new story within the universe, they weren't however quite as lucky with their spin on Game of Thrones, which takes place between the events of the 3rd and 5th season of the TV series. While this game does introduce us to Family Forrester, bannerman of the Stark family in the north, it does have us interacting with many familiar Game of Thrones faces, including the one you probably never want to cross paths with, Ramsay Snow, the bastard of House Bolton. In the very first episode, while playing as young Ethan Forrester, you are confronted by Ramsay Snow as he represents his father as new Warden of the North. In a confrontation that sees Ramsay give away half of your lands, install a garrison of men from a rival family, and threaten to take your twin sister as his ward, you can either choose to approach this diplomatically or confront Ramsay directly. Sadly, however, whatever you choose won't matter, as poor Ethan ends up stabbed in the end. Although, with what we know about Ramsay Snow, that's a better fate than Theon. Number 9. Firewatch. Firewatch sees you take on the shoes of Henry, recent employee of the Shoshone National Forest. As you go about your task of monitoring fires and exploring the parkland, you encounter mysterious occurrences linked to a mystery which happened years earlier. Throughout the game, you're entirely on your own, with the exception of the voice of your colleague Delilah over your walkie-talkie. Being your only contact with another person in the game, Henry and Delilah talk and bond throughout, and you're given branching dialogue options which seem to impact your relationship. You can be aloof, keep things professional, or try and spark up a romance. If you do choose to spark up a romance, there is a point towards the end of the game where it seems you're finally going to meet Delilah face to face. However, in the end, nothing you said or did matter, as Delilah chooses not to meet with Henry and to remain nothing more than friends. Number 8. Deus Ex Human Revolution. Eidos Montreal's stealth cyberpunk first-person shooter was widely praised for its plot, character customization, and freedom of choice in its story. Players can choose whether they go in stealth or all guns blazing, which augmentations they want to upgrade, and a variety of dialogue options with NPCs which will either complete or close off certain quests. However, where this is all for naught is in Adam Jensen's fate. In the game's finale, you can choose whether the world sees the whole truth, an edited truth, or nothing at all, to let humanity decide its own fate without any information. While your choice will play a different cutscene, the result will ultimately be the same. Adam Jensen will die. That is, until Eidos decide to bring him back for Mankind Divided. Number 7. Spec Ops The Line. Another game which presents the player with multiple endings, Spec Ops The Line has been dissected numerous times and praised for how it flipped the script on the standard military shooter of the early 2010s. Earlier in the game, when you're presented with 2 hanging prisoners, players must choose which one to save. If you decide to try and run, snipers will turn on you and gun you down, and the second you choose one, the other is shot. The kicker in this choice? Well, as you discover during the game's mind-bending climax, both men had already perished and it was all in your head. Number 6. Wolfenstein The New Order. We discussed in a previous video about how Machine Games' Wolfenstein The New Order gave the franchise new life and also paved the way for the likes of Doom. Early in the game, after recovering from your catatonic state and escaping from your psychiatric facility, BJ Blazkowicz finds himself on a train heading for the Nazi capital. During a brief scene on the train, while dressed as a Nazi officer, you come into contact with Frau Engel and her boy toy Hans. Engel claims that she has a method to detect people pure of blood and sits you down in her booth. With a loaded gun in front of you, you're presented with a series of photographs, and Engel will comment on each of your choices, and there's a real sense of needing to get this right. Except, there isn't really. It doesn't matter what photos you choose, as Frau Engel points out at the end of the interaction, if you weren't pure and loyal to their cause, you would have tried to pick up the gun and shoot her there and then. If you're curious about what happens if you do try, well, you don't get very far, because accompanying Frau Engel and Hans are several SS officers and one heavy robot ready to cut you down. Number 5. Deadly Premonition. The 2010 open-world survival horror game Deadly Premonition does a lot right in terms of giving players enough freedom to approach the game the way they want, while still managing survival systems such as sleep and hunger. Playing as York Morgan, an FBI agent investigating the murder of a young woman which bears similarities to a string of murders across the country, during your investigation you will engage and interact with NPCs around town who may give you side quests as you unravel the mystery of the Raincoat Killer. While you solve the murder of the 18-year-old that brought you to town, you uncover a deeper supernatural conspiracy. At the game's climax, your new love interest Emily has a tree growing out of her, as she begs you to put her out of her misery, which brings back some repressed memories of your parents in the exact same scenario. You're given the choice to point your gun at Emily, point the gun at the game's antagonist, or turn the gun on yourself. If you choose anything other than Emily, however, you are effectively failing the game and are forced to focus on reality and redo the whole scene again. This lack of real choice was heavily criticised at the time, and a director's cut edition was released which fixed the issue by introducing an alternate ending players could experience based on their choice. Number 4. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Arguably the largest Assassin's Creed game, until this year's Valhalla releases, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is the second in the series to adopt the more action RPG-heavy gameplay mechanics. Players are presented with a number of choices throughout the game, including the fact that you can romance just about every major NPC, or let your sword do the talking a lot of the time. There are also several missions where your decisions will impact whether you can convince certain members of the Cult of Cosmos to leave on their own accord, or your decisions may lead to a character's death. There is also the first choice you make, whether you're going to play as Cassandra or Alexios. Regardless of who you choose, the story is the same, and your sibling will be placed in the role of antagonist. However, that's not even the choice we want to highlight in this entry. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is set against the backdrop of the war between Sparta and Athens, with each of the game's regions being held under either Spartan or Athenian control. Despite the fact that you are a Spartan and a descendant of the great Leonidas, as a Misthios, or mercenary for hire, you don't have a side in this war. In each region you can complete missions, weaken the hold that either side has, and then engage in one of the game's battle missions. You can back Sparta in one region and Athens in another. If you were so inclined, you could back Sparta and then flip sides within the same region with no lasting consequences. In fact, in your pursuit of the members of the Cult of Cosmos, you will have to fight for opposing sides in the war. Number 3. Saints Row 4. Saints Row has never been a franchise that takes itself too seriously, so it should come as no surprise that major decisions aren't taken that seriously either. Starting life out as a GTA clone, the entries in the Saints Row series have gotten increasingly wild. That's no more true than with Saints Row 4, where we catch up with the boss, who has been elected President of the United States after winning the adoration of the American public by stopping Washington DC being hit by a nuclear missile in the previous game. During the game's intro, you're walking down the halls of the White House and are presented with a pretty major choice from your Vice President, the silky smooth voiced Keith David. What's the choice, you ask? Oh, nothing major, just curing world hunger or curing cancer. The catch? You only have the budget to do one. Ultimately, your world-changing choice means nothing because 10 minutes later, you're blasting aliens and saving the day. Number 2. Batman Arkham City. Batman Arkham City iterated and improved on the formula laid out by the excellent Arkham Asylum, expanding the action to a bigger sandbox, introducing new skills, gadgets, and characters. One of the other things that Arkham City introduces is the ability to play as Catwoman throughout parts of the game. Catwoman's story in Arkham City intertwines with Batman several times throughout the game, including in the penultimate Catwoman mission where you finally break into Hugo Strange's vault and are about to make away with the loot. Before you leave, you are confronted with the image of Batman crushed under rubble and left with the choice to either save him or take the loot and run. It's not like he'll die, it's Batman, right? If you do choose to take the money and run, you'll watch Catwoman exit the building, walk up the stairs, and then see the credits roll. You'll hear Oracle sending out a distress signal, and then it's game over. Until that is, the game literally hits the rewind button and sets you back to make the right decision this time. Number 1. Bioshock Infinite. Bioshock Infinite was the game that inspired this list. Where the original Bioshock's twist centered around the idea of choice and free will, Infinite doesn't quite live up to its predecessor's heights. From the outset of the game, you must choose to be baptized and born anew in order to get into Columbia. Decline, and it's effectively game over. Not long after that non-choice, you are confronted with the ugliness of Columbia's open racism. A mixed-race couple is dragged on stage in a spectacle which presents the character with the choice to throw a baseball at the couple or at the announcer. Regardless of what you choose, you're interrupted before you can make your throw as Columbia's security notices the mark on your hand as the false prophet. It's not the only choice that you make with no consequence, whether it's showing your ticket at the airship, heads or tails with the Lutece twins, or whether you gift Elizabeth, the bird, or the cage brooch. None of these choices impact or change the story in any meaningful way. Although, and we wish we could properly credit whoever wrote this, one way we've heard of looking at this is not how the character's choices impact the game, rather how the game's choices impact the character. And we think that's a pretty nice way to end the list. What games did you feel your choices had no consequence in? Does it bother you when games do this? Let us know in the comments below. Once again, if you like what we're doing here, help us grow by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel. This has been GameGentleman, and thanks for watching.